There are several things the Talmud says that are predestined. Your basher, the one who you'll marry, your home, the place that you live, and your parnossa, your vocation. And we feel that there was some degree of destiny. I grew up as a son of a rabbi who was a rabbi in a very quiet suburb in Doncaster. And it was a beautiful, warm atmosphere. Everybody knew each other. It was always the same people in shul. This is extremely different and something I would never have seen myself involved in. And Rochel as well, to see herself involved in a synagogue that is really quite cosmopolitan and on the cutting edge. And every Shabbos, there are only 2 or 3 people that are the same. Everyone else are tourists or business people that are coming through, and what a great joy and honour to serve in a shul that's so rich in history and really coming at the end of a line of such a story. And we hope to be able to continue to write that story, and there should be many more chapters ahead.
Well, here we are in the manuscripts reading room, which is part of the La Trobe collection within the State Library of Victoria. The archives of the East Melbourne Hebrew congregation were deposited here some years ago.
By 1860, the East Melbourne Hebrew congregation had built a beautiful synagogue, still there, on the corner of Stephen Street and Little Lonsdale Street, and they chose the best architects. By this time, Melbourne was probably the wealthiest city in the world, because of the discovery of gold, obviously, and before the gold ran out, but the buildings remained as an indicator of what it might have been. Many Jews from Eastern Europe found their way to Victoria as a result of the gold rush, and coming from the more orthodox Polish and Russian communities of Eastern Europe, they were attracted to the Frummer's Shul, as East Melbourne became known. By 1877, the new synagogue was dedicated. Well, the land and the building together cost the enormous sum of £7,000. And it's now, of course, the oldest place of Jewish worship in the city of Melbourne.
As an historian, I understand, as do most people, that we don't know where we're going until we know where we've come from. It's the memory of the congregation. And because it's so early in the history of this state, it also contributes to the memory of the state of Victoria.
Well, Melbourne is a very multicultural, multi-faith city. We come from over 200 different nations. We speak more than 230 different dialects and languages, and we practice more than 115 faiths. But we are still one Melbourne. But inside that very rich tapestry, the honoured history of the Jewish community is a very strong theme. And of course, I take a particular interest in central places of worship, that is, in the city itself. In many ways, these places of worship, including the East Melbourne Synagogue, don't just serve a local community. They serve a Melbourne, Victorian, Australian, and in fact an international community. And that's the importance, I think, of the East Melbourne Synagogue. Its restoration is really not just for a local congregation. It is a much broader, I would say church as a Christian, but I suppose I'd have to say a much broader synagogue for the Jewish people.
Well, what is exciting is that the East Melbourne Shul is undergoing a complete renaissance in terms of its public programs, but the actual building is tired. This beautiful historic synagogue is in desperate need of restoration. The roof leaks, mould is growing on the walls, the carpet's threadbare, and the security is positively archaic. We just cannot allow the deterioration to continue, and we absolutely need to find the resources to restore the building to its former glory.
My uncle used to sit here when I was little, and my father sat there and I sat next to him. My family have been members of East Melbourne continuously for 100 years.
My mother was married here on the 23rd of December 1941, so 5 days short of 70 years ago. I was bar mitzvahed here, Meryl and I were married here, and all 3 of our children have been married here after today.
This shul is basically the second shul of a lot of people in Melbourne as well, because their heritage, their grandparents, their families used to live in Carlton and used to come to this shul. And so a lot of people in Melbourne feel that closeness and some special affinity towards the East Melbourne shul.
Having the family connection to the shul, both in terms of being part of the shul, part of the building almost. I see the family, our family is having been there for 100 years, and it's been, it's something that's an ongoing chain really. It's a chain of generations, part of the fabric of our family. It's part of the fabric of our life really.
The synagogue itself is a beautiful, peaceful island in the middle of busy Melbourne. It's a big city, and right outside the heart of Melbourne we have this spiritual haven, really peaceful. I don't have to strain, not emotionally, not mentally, not verbally, not acoustically. What a special atmosphere there is in this synagogue.
The late Mr. Schwartz told me, he said, every festival and every Shabbos needs to have a service for this to be called a shul. And that's the bedrock of the synagogue. And on top of that, we started classes, programs. Every festival will focus on the children and have a children's program. For some youngsters that go to the public schools in the area, Fitzroy and so on, they can come here. And there's a very strong interfaith component to the synagogue as well. So Greek Orthodox, Muslims we've had this year as part of the Anti-Defamation Council, part of B'nai B'rith. We've had really all types of groups from all other religions. One night I got sprung with a group of about 20 Mormons, and we gave them a tour as well and a talking to. And almost every religious affiliation feels this is a central hub. It's accessible, it's open, it's easygoing. And like I said, our approach is to make Judaism as accessible as possible to all, Jews and non-Jews.
The Berlin of today commemorates the victims of the racial persecution and of the Holocaust in many ways. There's the Jewish Museum.
We have programs for tourists as well, so we give them guides, and of course programs for schools coming through.
This shul has a beautiful tradition that I appreciate. There's a great deal of symbolism in this shul. I feel a linkage to a long past here in the shul. And I appreciate the Hamisha way, if I may use some Yiddish, that is part of this shul here. But to have a shul like this, so rich in tradition, so beautiful, and with such welcoming ways, I think is essential for travelers.
So one of the things I like about this shul is that there's a constant flow of visitors coming in. Sometimes we get advance notice about them, often we don't, and people just show up and will join us for a Friday night meal or for a Shabbos day Kiddush. And it's always really interesting and exciting, keeps us on our toes, we never know what's happening, but so far it's always been really positive and nice.
We just finished a wedding today, and at the wedding somebody comes and said, I haven't been into the synagogue in 50 years. I remember living in Brunswick and walking down Nicholson Street, and you could see hordes of people all walking towards East Melbourne. And something clicked in my mind, and I said, well, we're not going to rest until that's the way it is again. Hordes of people walking down Nicholson Street, down Victoria, down Albert, all headed towards the synagogue.
And had over 150 people in the park opposite the shul, and probably 60 were kids, and a lot of local people. I think there's so many things to look forward to in the future. Rabbi Gutnick has some amazing plans. Interesting lectures, interesting activities, new families that have moved into the area around the city, around Fitzroy, Brunswick, Collingwood, Richmond, Carlton, and these families are starting to get involved in the shul. And they're families that would never have got involved with Jewish activities before.
And that's the goal, really, to make the shul a spiritual epicentre again. It's not something that we have to create anew, because it once was like that. Yes, the demographic has changed and society has changed, but as a spiritual epicentre, I think we can be that again.